The most powerful financial weapon in history has been used 4 times. 4 times the country that fired it ended up weaker. Not immediately, not visibly, but predictably and permanently. This is not coincidence. It is a pattern, and it is running right now. Beijing, February 26, 2022. His name is Yi Gong, governor of the People's Bank of China. He is reading a newswire headline on his screen. Russia's 7 largest banks cut from SWIFT. He does not call a press conference. He does not issue a statement. He opens a drawer and pulls out a single document. It is a contingency plan for CIPS, China's own payment network, that has been sitting there, half-finished, since 2015. He picks up the phone. What he does next will take 3 years to become visible. But the clock starts now. Financial weaponization follows 5 stages. Every time, the dominant power controls the infrastructure. It weaponizes the infrastructure against a target. The target finds alternatives. Neutral countries hedge. The weapon loses power. Britain ran this sequence in 1914. The bill arrived 30 years later. America ran it in 1979. And again in 2022. The sequence does not care who fires the weapon. It only cares that the weapon was fired. Before 1973, international payments were a tangle of telex messages and manual reconciliation. 15 banks from Europe and North America built a fix, a shared messaging network, SWIFT. Not a bank, not a transfer system, a communication layer. It sends the instruction. The money moves separately. By 2022, more than 11,000 institutions across over 200 countries, approximately 42 million messages every day. Every trade transaction, every bond settlement, every corporate payment crossing a border, all dependent on access, neutral by design, a Belgian cooperative, governed by its member banks, but operating under Belgian and European law, which follows US and EU sanctions. Neutrality ended the day it became useful as a weapon. This is the first mechanism. Infrastructure as exclusion tool. August 1914. London. Britain passes the Trading with the Enemy Act. German assets in British territory, businesses, accounts, securities, placed under state control. The justification is clean. Germany invaded Belgium. The immediate effect is real. German banks lose London market access. German trade collapses. But neutral countries are watching. Switzerland, Sweden, the Netherlands. They draw one conclusion. Assets in London are not safe if Britain disapproves of your government. The criteria for exclusion are now political, not financial. Reserve managers quietly begin to diversify, 1 percentage point at a time. By 1944, Bretton Woods. 44 nations formalize what has already happened in practice. The dollar replaces the pound. Sterling's share of global reserves, roughly 55% in 1950, under 10% by 1970. 30 years. From weapon to irrelevance. Stage 1 through 5. Complete. This is the second mechanism, the observer effect. November 14th, 1979. Washington. President Carter signs the executive order. Around $8 billion in Iranian government assets held in U.S. banks are frozen overnight. Every OPEC finance minister reads the same headline and asks the same question. If Iranian assets can be frozen by executive order, why not ours? The lesson is absorbed quietly. Then, 2012. Iran is disconnected from SWIFT. Oil revenues fall from around $115 billion in 2011 to $62 billion by 2013. The weapon works, immediately and visibly. But Iran spends those same years in Stage 3, building alternatives, barter arrangements, bilateral currency deals, non-dollar trade routes with China, Russia, Turkey. When sanctions return in 2018, Iran survives better than in 2012. Not because the sanctions are weaker, because the target prepared. Russia watches all of this and takes notes. But here's the problem. Russia is not Iran. Russia is the world's 11th largest economy, a major energy exporter with deep integration into global commodity flows. Cutting Russia from SWIFT in February 2022 is not excluding a peripheral country. It is removing a major node from the network itself. The ruble falls roughly 30% within days. Sberbank and VTB face acute liquidity stress. Tactically, the weapon works. But 50 countries are now running the same calculation Iran ran in 2012. And Yigong is already on the phone. Picture a refinery manager in Gujarat, India, March 2022. His Russian oil supplier calls. The usual dollar payment channel no longer works. His bank does not want the exposure to U.S. secondary sanctions. He has two options: stop buying or find another way. He finds another way. Rupees, direct, no dollars, no SWIFT. Within months, India is settling Russian oil purchases in its own currency, a workaround born out of necessity. Infrastructure built under pressure. That infrastructure does not disappear when the pressure eases. Back in Beijing, Yigong's phone call has consequences. SIP's transaction volume grows more than 50% year-on-year by 2023. Participating institutions expand to over 1,400 across more than 100 countries. Saudi Arabia opens discussions on yuan-denominated oil sales to China. The petrodollar system, the architecture guaranteeing global dollar demand since 1974, develops its first visible crack. None of these arrangements match the efficiency of SWIFT and dollars. That is no longer the point. The point is, build the alternative before you need it. And alternatives, once built, do not disappear. And if this sounds familiar, it should. This is sterling's decline, replaying in real time. The pound did not lose reserve status because Britain lost a war. It lost reserve status because neutral countries lost confidence in unconditional access. The moment they understood that London could freeze assets for political reasons, the exit began. Gradual, orderly, irreversible. The dollar replaced sterling precisely because it offered what sterling no longer could: open markets, deep liquidity, and one critical promise: access is available to anyone, regardless of politics. That promise was the foundation. That promise broke on February 26, 2022, the day Yigong pulled that document from his drawer. What happens when trust in foundational infrastructure begins to erode? The dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves: 71% in 2000, 65% by 2015, 58% by 2024. Slow, directional, uninterrupted. Central banks accumulate gold at near-record levels, not because gold is efficient, but because gold cannot be sanctioned. It exists outside every payment network. No government can freeze it remotely. China, Russia, Turkey, India, Poland, all accumulating. Not for transactions, for insurance. The system no longer requires a conscious decision to shift. Every finance ministry runs the same numbers, reaches the same conclusion: reduce exposure, build redundancy, diversify before you need to. Your savings, your pension fund, your purchasing power, denominated in a system whose dominance is not permanent, not abstract anymore. So what should you take away from this? Financial weapons work tactically. They fail strategically. Every time. Trust is the foundation of reserve currency status. Once fractured, it does not simply repair. Alternatives, once constructed, outlast the crisis that created them. The theme is constant. The dominant power believes it is applying maximum pressure. It is actually funding the construction of the exit. 58%. Dollar share of global reserves in 2024, down from 71 at the turn of the century. Britain ran this exact sequence. 30 years from weapon to replacement. America fired in 2022. Yi Gang is still on the phone. That is not history. That is the pattern completing itself. Money memory. So the past stops surprising you.